Hey everyone, welcome back to Kids in the 90s. It's Jeremy again. Getting a new episode on the weekly Wednesdays. I do want to throw out that we do have several social media sites, so check those out. They're all going to be at Kids in the 90s, one word, no spaces, a Z on kids, no apostrophe between the 0 and the S on 90s. So Kids in the 90s on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's also YouTube videos that are popping up on about the podcast with actual images. So if you're more of a visual person, you can check that out. See exactly what we're talking about in these podcasts and follow and remember a little bit more and feel a little bit more from whenever you're a kid. So still at work today, just finished up. Been wanting to get this gentleman that's here with me for a while because we're talking about a very, very 90s topic. I told him we will use him as like a series guy, may throw out some different people with it later, but we're going to be talking some Nickelodeon today, and specifically game shows today. So we'll get to the more animated and live action stuff later because those were great as well. But today's going to be pretty much all game shows. So today I have Ronnie and Natale with me. Ronnie, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what year you were born.
Hey guys, I was born in 1985. So I feel the peak of my 90s. It was right about the peak of me understanding kind of pop culture and things that were going on. And I remember when you told everybody you were going to start doing this podcast and we started throwing out different ideas, and I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Oh yeah, that'd be fun to talk about. And then you said Nickelodeon and I was like, oh, put me down for that one. I got to do that one.
So like you said, 85, we're on point. And most of the things that we talk about together outside of the podcast is on point with each other. Whenever, like you said, whenever I started wanting to actually do a podcast on this topic, Ronnie was gung-ho about it, very supportive. On Facebook, he is one of the founding members of a group of collaborators and guests of the podcast. So we'll have him back to do more episodes on Nickelodeon and everything, but we're going to jump into some different game shows. And as a kid, I wanted to be on every one of these game shows. I knew I would do well. I loved PE. I gave it everything, and I was like, I could do this. Didn't matter which one it was. So we're going to go down, and I'm going to start with one that was actually, I did not know this. I thought it was on TV longer because they replayed it. And actually nowadays, they don't replay it even on the teen late night Nick that they still do on Teen Nick. And that was Nick Arcade. Nick Arcade actually started January of 92. And believe it or not, it only lasted till November of 92, but it was 2 seasons. And Nick Arcade, from what I remember, it was one of them game shows that you had to wake up super early to catch.
It was like 6:30 on Saturday.
Yeah.
The first Saturday morning cartoon that would come on.
And so you would have to get up early, and I know every now and then I would. Another show that might come up on a different episode was Ghost Rider. That was really early episodes that you had to watch. But Nick Arcade was like a virtual reality video game show. You had trivia questions you would answer about video games, and then you would get sent into this virtual reality zone where you're on a green screen, you're looking back to see where you're at, and you're going around and tapping different points and completing these objectives to ultimately win.
I remember watching that and just as a young kid being convinced, how are they actually inside of a video game? Like looking back on it now, and if you watch episodes of it, and you can clearly see it's like bad weatherman green screening, and there you can. But like I just remember thinking, how cool would that be? Like they're inside of a video game, and that was one of my favorite ones growing up.
You thought Tron is real?
Real, man, all of it.
But one funny thing about that show, and I remember this, they were always giving away BK Night shoes. That was always the prize that you got. I was like, dang, I don't have any BK. Maybe I need some BK Nights.
It's funny too, like when you're younger and you don't realize it. As you get older, you get a little bit more smart of the world. But like every single game show basically gave away these same prizes. You know, so you didn't realize it watching that, and you're like you said, every game show is giving away BK Nights or
mountain bikes.
Mountain bikes, yeah. There's a BM, yeah. Everybody's a mountain bike.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. and we'll go over that more. Because I know you got some more of these on the list, so you throw one out and I'll kind of hop in with you. We'll go over that and we'll just keep bouncing back and forth.
So it was, I was sitting down and I was trying to think because I didn't want to miss one, and I was flooded. So I was like, man, how am I going to narrow this down to kind of my best ones? But Nick Arcade was definitely number one on the list just because it was so unique for something. But I would say the second one, and one that kind of hit close to me, was Guts.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it because, one, the Mike O'Malley, the guy, was so he was intense, and then the kind of evolution would go from it's the aggro crag, and then it's the mega crag, and then like season 3 it's like the super mega aggro crag, and then it was the Olympics. And I really like the Olympics ones because I played Pee Wee sports and all that, and I was like, oh yeah, I could do some of that, that would be fun. And it was great because you could tell when some kids on there were highly athletic and some kids were not highly athletic, and there would be just kids just running away and beating everybody. It just really wasn't fair, but it was still fun to watch. And you go on eBay now and can find pieces of that aggro crag for big bucks.
Yeah. So that was actually the second one on my list too, was Guts, and it came out in 92 to 95. Mike O'Malley had that down. The thing about it was there was a blue player, red player, and purple player, and you're doing all these crazy games that you're like, the PE gods came up with this.
Yes, it's like PE on steroids.
Yeah, you're bouncing on bungee cords. You're inside of a pool in a canoe, paddling through buoys and stuff. That's where I learned the term buoy. I knew buoy because of the buoyancy, because of Michael O'Malley and Guts. And you said it. If you went up the aggro crag and you won, you got a gold medal and you got a quote-unquote piece which it wasn't a piece. But as a kid, you're like, oh, damn, I want that piece. And I was actually going back and watching videos of some of these game shows, and that thing was huge. It was about half the size of these young teens.
So it's filmed in Nickelodeon Studios. So what do you do? Like, I'm sure most of those people are vacationing and somehow they get on the show. What are you just supposed to carry that big, gigantic hunk of probably fiberglass and plastic?
That's your
around?
personal item on the plane.
How is that getting home?
Your backpack's getting thrown away because you got and it would be worth it. I mean, because then they're like, we're going to laser etch your name right here into the middle, and you're like, personalized.
If I had one, I am 35 years old, and it would still it would be mounted in my house
mantle.
Yes.
Which leads us to another one we talked about earlier, and this one was actually fun. It was really cool. It was Wild and Crazy Kids. Came out from 90 to 92, and you had Omar Gooding as one of the hosts, and he was the best host on there. And then he went on to do more things, but it was teams. So we talk about your colors as team, and all it looked like you really got was a shirt that said Wild and Crazy shirt of kids of that color. But you were playing some fun games. I mean, you're thinking this was, and I'm gonna keep throwing out. Most of these were physical activity games. And so this one took it to more of a team building type game.
It was a lot of stuff like camp, like if you were at camp, like a lot of group activities and contests.
And we don't think about it now, but these were great techniques that they were using with kids to actually help them to better themselves in these areas of to fight childhood obesity. And I mean, we were always running around trying to be super active, knowing we probably weren't going to go on a trip to Orlando to Universal Studios. But the slim chance that you did get to go one, you wanted to be in the best shape you could. So you'd be playing basketball every day. And we were talking about acting like the floor is lava. And, climbing from one side of the swing set, monkey bar, jungle gym to the other without hitting the ground. Just to be as strong and fast as you could be. And that one, you had 6 different teams. And it was this team versus that team. You have about 3 rounds. And whoever came out won. And the hosts were very engaged in that. It was different than most.
They were like a part of the team.
Yeah, so they would either be a part of the team or they would be the person that the team had to use a prop per se that they had to use to accomplish the goal of that certain activity. Any other thoughts on Wild and Crazy Kids before we move on? I mean, that's essentially it in a nutshell.
I distinctly remember one of the challenges was it was a group and they had cans, and some of the cans had water and some of the cans had soda, and it was like a contest. You had to shake the can up and stab it with a pin, and if you got sprayed with soda, you were out. But that got me in trouble because then later on in the day, I grabbed a can of Dr. Pepper out of the fridge and shook it up and stuck it with a pin just to see if it would really work, and I got yelled at.
Yeah, I could see that happening. You probably had to clean up the mess too.
Yep.
What's next on your list?
So I want to touch quickly, just because it's a classic and I think it's one that we all kind of grew up on, was Double Dare. I remember I got to actually tour Nickelodeon Studios one time, and it was late at night. We had done the whole thing at the park at Universal, and we were actually going on a Ghostbusters ride, and it was like we actually got out of line like right before the ride because it wouldn't have made it to our tour or whatever, and we got to tour over. And I remember I got to see two sets. The first one was Double Dare. We got to walk basically on the floor, all the crazy lights and colors and everything like that and how they set everything up. But I just remember watching that show and thinking, like, the obstacles that they had to do at the very end. The physical challenges and the trivia, that was all kind of fun. But, like, the obstacles, I remember the Sunday slide. It literally was, I'm sure it was foam and shaving cream and whatever it was, but it looked like a gigantic ice cream sundae. And being a kid thinking, is that really all whipped cream? And that's all, and they had to dig it all out and get the flags and everything. But Double Dare is probably, of all these, the first ones that I really watched regularly, because Nick Arcade 1 was too early and was very short. But I think Double Dare was the first one that I really got into.
And Double Dare was actually the first one out of all the ones that we have to actually come out on Nickelodeon. It actually originated in '86 and went on for the most part to '93 until you got to some later iterations. But yeah, the best part of it was the Double Dare obstacle course, or the family Double Dare obstacle course. And you go through, you have 60 seconds. I like the family one better because you had to have the adults pick up the slack.
Yep.
And if they were...
it was always a dad or somebody who just couldn't climb up a pole or squeeze through some tiny little space.
I like that I always found that the dad and them had trouble getting the flag out of the giant nose.
The nose, yeah.
The nose and the slime, they couldn't get it out. But for the good thing about a lot of these games were they knew that they were kids. So if you didn't win the last level, you still got a lot of the prizes.
Yep.
So you go through this 8-stage course and you're going to get the boombox and the BK Knights and the BMX bike. But maybe you don't get the car or the trip, but you still felt like you accomplished something. Now, how you and your parents got that back home, if you didn't live in Orlando, Florida, may be a problem, but they might have shipped it to their house. But that was another good thing about a lot of these games. Before I go into one of the best, I'm going to let's just move into another one, because that had Mark Summers as the host. And Mark Summers was an amazing young host.
He had a couple shows on Nickelodeon.
He also had What Would You Do from 91 to 93, and it was a little bit different. This was a straight up audience participation game. So he would walk around the audience, find certain types of people, and kind of feel out if they were the right person for it. And then there was the Pie Pod, and so he could have a kid go down there, try and be a kid salesman to get someone to do something. Or when I was refreshing, they had one kid and they had a legendary mask maker, and he put the kid's mom in a mask, and the kid had to figure out. And as a kid, we'd think, oh dang, that's pretty crazy. He got the kid, his mom had to talk to him and stuff. So nowadays, as an adult, you see the reasoning that the kid's picking this person, but he picked the mom, and then the audience got to pick how many pies they got hit with. And so he'd always go 1, 2, 3, and then I'll go 4. So 4 pies, and they're all on hands that get flung on this adult's face or this kid's face. It was just fun, cool stuff. Different from the other games, because a lot of game shows, they pick them out prior, and they might have picked these people out before, but it looked more of audience participation. We're going to go through like a Deal or No Deal and find people that look or want to get in on it.
No, I definitely agree. That was the one I was thinking of, the one we were talking about earlier. It was kind of a cross between Let's Make a Deal and America's Funniest Home Videos. I always remember that. There's always some quirky, clip, and they would pause it and like, so what's he gonna do? And if you got it right, then you got the pie in the face. So you said you had one that you thought was the best.
It's on your list
Is it
too.
on that
One
one?
of the best
Are we
too. So
thinking-
let me throw out this last.
Okay.
The last couple here. Another one that had a lot of audience participation, and it wasn't really a true game show. It was more of a comedy sketch show with cartoons, with a little bit of audience participation for games, and that was Wienerville. It came out in 93, 94, and it was pretty much a one-man show with occasional guests and celebrities and stuff, and then they would show cartoons like Mr. Magoo and stuff along this 30-minute period. You'd have, there was a little puppet named Boney, and he would go, I'm Boney, leave me alone, after he like badmouthed something somebody said. But then the game show part of it is probably one of the best. I mean, in the show, they're always putting like a head in between, their head in between a curtain, and then they're using little arms and legs and stuff, and they're really just puppet arms and stuff, and they've got to create and do this task while behind the screen, which they can't really see, and try and move like balls in this a tube, or do this and do that. And so it's kind of game showy, but it wasn't like a true game show. But I have to, because a lot of people don't remember that show, and it was a very quirky show. It wasn't my favorite show, but the oddness about it did sit in me, and I haven't forgotten that show. It's definitely one I remember.
I remember when you brought it up, and I was like, I know that name, but I don't remember seeing that. And then when we looked at the pictures, I was like, oh wait, I do remember the head in the curtain with the puppet head.
And that was the main part.
Yeah.
That's the thing you couldn't remember, and how silly. And sometimes you'd have two people against each other or more. But yeah, that was one that I wanted to bring up. The other one is one that you helped me remember the name of it, looked it up. I remembered it had Summer Sanders on it, and that was Figure It Out. Mm-hmm. And you'd have these kids, and they did weird hobbies and things. They had weird talents and stuff. And basically a celebrity panel would have to guess what this kid was doing by doing different things or getting certain clues. And then if they couldn't get it right, then the kid would get more prizes along.
Yeah, yep.
Not the best game show, but I did remember that as I was thinking back, and I actually did like that. A lot of it, like we talked about, was probably because we thought Summer Sanders was attractive.
Absolutely.
But I did think it was a fun game. They did, some of the celebrities, like we talked about, had a lot of the All That cast.
I want to say like Keenan was on there all the time.
I think they rotated.
Yeah.
But you also had Penny Hardaway was on there.
Yeah, they would have some.
You had all kinds of different celebrities that would join in, and some of them were athletes, some were from other Nickelodeon shows or other kid shows. So another one. Now let's go in, and I'll let you throw out the last one that we have here.
I think we might have saved the best for last, but
yeah.
I don't think we do this podcast justice if we didn't talk about Legends of the Hidden Temple.
Oh my goodness, that's the one I had. I knew you had it.
Yep.
I've got more notes on this one than any other one on the list. So
this was actually the second set that I got to see when I did my little studio tour. Now, this was late, so there wasn't anybody there. It was just you got to walk by the set. But I'll never forget one thinking, like, so when you see it on TV, right, and you watch it, you've got this big final stage optical course, and you have the pond and everything, and it's like, wow, that's so crazy. But spoiler alert, it's actually super, super small.
You just took my... No, that's my term.
No, for later. It's actually like the whole set was really, really small, and I was like, wow, they do all this like in this one little spot. But we got to go down and kind of see the temple run, as you would call it, within the final stage. But just being a huge fan of Indiana Jones and that whole kind of concept, I was hooked immediately.
Yeah, so if you all have not seen this, I heard it may be making a comeback, but a little bit different. But for those of you that have never seen this, it started in 93 and lasted till 95. The crazy thing is the majority of these games ended at 95. I don't know if it was a push away from game shows or what for kids, but 95 was when this ended. And like you said, it was kind of Indiana Jones-esque. You had Kirk Fogg as the
great host for this, right?
Yeah,
like a perfect name for this type of game show.
Yeah, well, we could talk about names all the time. I met a guy named Nick Nickel once, and I said that's one of the best superhero aliases I've ever heard. I wish my name was kind of along those lines. It doesn't have the same alliteration, but yeah, Kirk Fogg, great name for a host. He was a good host for this show. Now you talk about the set. The set was really a swimming pool that they used for a moat. Then you had your steps of knowledge, and then the hidden temple itself. Basically based off a Mayan temple, so that'll give you some visuals if you haven't seen it. But there were 6 teams, and these teams were of pairs, and you had one boy and one girl. And I'm gonna list off the names of them to take you back. When I was this age, purple was my favorite color. So when we talked about guts, I always wanted to be the purple player. When we talked about this, I wanted to be a purple parrot. I was a purple fan, and that was because I was a Barkley fan. We've talked about this, and the purple jersey and the bald shaved head. So we won't go into that again, but I was a purple fan. But there was the red jaguars, the blue barracudas, green monkeys, orange iguanas, purple parrots, silver snakes. And so they had those different teams of 2, and you would start doing the initial moat usually. Then you go to some trivia. And there was another thing we haven't hit on yet, and that was the Olmec. And the Olmec was this big old stone storyteller. So before a certain part would come up, he would tell a story about it or do the trivia or...
Yeah, it was always based around some folklore, legend, story or something.
It was either history, mythology, or geography. And these kids had to answer this, basically getting these pennants so that they could use them later if they made it to the temple run, which was a 3-minute course where you're going through. You've got to get these different pieces of the artifact, trying not to get captured by these temple guards. If you do, and you have a pendant, so you wanted the pendants, you could give it to them. You had to have a full pendant, and you could give it to them, and they would go away.
And I would say for a kids competition show, like those temple guards, were jacked up, and they would always hide some spot, and they would just jump out. Like those kids would legitimately be scared when they ran into the wrong room with the temple guards.
Made you feel like down to earth security. And they were beefy, and they would scare the crap out of these kids. So, but once you got the artifact, they went away. You didn't have to worry about certain things, and you get to the end. You're trying to put the Shrine of the Silver Monkey together in the time.
Everybody's pitfall was that room.
It was 3 pieces. You just put the base, but
I think
they were so frazzled from the time and probably the temple guards.
I think the middle part was so it had to go a certain way, but it was basically looked like the same way as each way, and they always have it backwards, and the head wasn't on just right, and
But if they were able to get that and complete that, then they would win. That was Legends of the Hidden Temple. Great game. I hope it makes a comeback. But Ronnie, tell us what you were hearing about a comeback. I don't know if you were just messing with me or if it was true or not. Was it you or somebody else?
I don't know. I've come back about this.
Somebody else told me that there's a Legends of the Hidden Temple.
There's a movie. Have you seen that?
There's the movie. I haven't seen it. It was on Nickelodeon also. But someone told me that's coming back, and it's going to be in a jungle, and you have to complete the task, but in a real jungle.
Sign me up if it is. I haven't heard that, but
that's what this. I don't remember who it was then. Somebody told me that earlier today, and I was like, I'm out. So I would do it in the little studio. I don't want to be running through the jungle grabbing snakes. We're gonna be. This is not Bear Grylls. This is real. There's no hotel on the other side of the street. There's snakes. Who knows what's out there.
It's just like Survivor. They've been all right out there.
I've been watching Kings of Pain. I know what can sting you out there, and I don't want to be doing a pain threshold and hoping there's a really good medical assistant there to help with that.
Well, if they're going to bring any one of these game shows back that we've talked about, I would bet that this one would probably be the one that would get the most attention.
That one actually came back as a board game that you can get at Target. The slang of the Sode today is one that Ronnie kind of brought up. I like to get other people's opinion, not just do everything that I think of. So I asked him. I said, "Hey, what's the 90s slang that you really remember and you kind of want to throw out?" And he said, "Not." So the word "not" with the exclamation point, you cannot say it in normal tone. So I could not go "not."
No, you got it.
Even there I changed it a little bit, so it probably would have been acceptable there. But go ahead, Ronnie. Give me your "not" story and why that was so impressionable.
So I was a little bit of a I wouldn't say problem child, but I was definitely a handful. And so watching Saturday Night Live, watching Wayne's World, and he said it, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny." So even in instances where it didn't make sense, I would, my mom would say, "Hey, go do this," and I'd be like, "Okay, I'll do it." Not, and just, I think I had a big white T-shirt that said "not" across it, that was oversized, but I would just say it nonstop, and I finally would get on people's nerves. And
I think everybody did that with that word, because it was like the way you could lie and say you weren't lying.
Exactly. Yeah,
like,
I'm
not gonna do my homework. Not.
Yeah,
I'm
I said,
gonna
"No,
do
you
that.
should
Yeah.
hurt me."
Yeah. So "not" is a word. If you remember, Borat tried to use it, could not get it down, and that's probably because he was not in the 90s.
Probably right.
This jacket is black. Not does not work like that. So. If you haven't ever used "not," you could probably throw it out and try to bring it back. I don't know if it will come back ever. But that's our 90s slang of the Sode. Today's spoiler alert is brought to you from 1999. It is a Bruce Willis film. I will tell you, I figured this out pretty early on in the movie, and so I was never a fan of this movie. I do like M. Night Shyamalan, but this was not one of my favorites at all. I am much more of an Unbreakable, or I probably even like The Village better than The Sixth Sense, which is sad to say. But The Visit's great. Those are not 90s movies, though. Neither is Unbreakable. But in The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, spoil time, he is dead the whole time.
Never saw it coming.
I knew it at the dinner with his wife. Why is his wife not paying attention? Even at a young age, I was like, why is this guy's wife just, ghosting him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was accidental. But all right, check out the social media again. We do appreciate you every time listening to the podcast. The small channel, trying to just talk about the 90s and help you feel good like we feel just conversing about it. Even if I'm not doing a podcast, I'm talking 90s all the time now. I even tell anybody I see that's around the age that would have enjoyed the 90s to check this out. So I'm glad you do. Remember, there's YouTube videos going up with more visuals of the things we talk about. We do have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's all Kids in the 90s, one word with the Z and no apostrophe. So check that out. Thanks again for listening. Say bye to Ronnie.
Bye.
We'll see you next time.